Today I am so excited because we have Jamie Crosbie. She's the founder of Proactivate, which is an expert in hiring super rock star salespeople. And she's been doing that for a long time. So she's an entrepreneur. She's an author of many books. She's a public speaker, a brilliant thought leader on mindset, and a TEDx guru. So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's such a pleasure being here with you.
Well, tell me a little bit about what sparked your interest in sales leadership.
Well, I would say, a natural at it, and maybe just came by it based on what I grew up with. So my mom was a speaker and a VP of sales, and I feel like many times around the dinner table, Jim, it was learning sales, or it was like being at a motivational talk. So inherently, I just had some of it really ingrained into me. And after graduating college and starting my career in leadership development, I intentionally then chose to enter the staffing industry, where I would be exposed to a lot of different industries and have a lot of young growth and leadership opportunity, and quickly became a go-to for salespeople. They would come to me and ask questions. I wasn't in sales, and they would say, "What do you think I should do?" And eventually, through that, became a sales leader and just continued to grow.
Well, you started Proactivate nearly 2 decades ago. What problems were you trying to solve when you started that company?
I saw a gap in the market for leaders of sales organizations to really be able to protect and propel their revenue proactively as it relates to talent. So I saw a gap in the traditional staffing industry and the model that traditional recruiters would use to find salespeople, because typically they would spend, a very short amount of time qualifying them. And I, at that point, was a VP of sales myself at Career Builder, and noticed that, we had to have a really in-depth qualification process to find great people. And that wasn't how the traditional model is set up in recruiting, or candidates were coached on what to say to get the job. And certainly salespeople know how to sell themselves, so they don't need any help with that from the recruiter. And then with Career Builder, we used outside recruiters because we typically couldn't find working and winning salespeople online. Those weren't the ones we were looking for. So I wanted to create a unique model that filled in the gaps of both of those offerings, and would bring sales leaders a proactive approach to replacing C players with A players, to having a funnel of top performers in case one were to leave unexpectedly or get promoted, or to grow and expand their offerings in the marketplace.
What, in going through that process, you've got an impressive career, building sales organizations. I want you to think about and talk to me about some of your, key moments, sales success or failures, or challenges you've had, just leadership lessons that you've gone through. What are some of those key moments that you've learned?
So I would say early on, in terms of leadership lessons, my first leadership experience, I would say, I quickly realized that I needed to see the gray more. I saw everything as very black and white. And as well, Jim, I felt like everyone should be as passionate and dedicated and committed as I was. So I didn't quite understand yet how to lead people individually. I expected them to care as much as I did. And it was somewhat really defeating at first, because I was disappointed a lot. And then I learned to adjust my leadership style to the individual, and that we were all motivated in different ways. So that was one of my earliest leadership lessons. I've also learned along the way to hire more slowly and methodically with a thoughtful process, and to make decisions when someone isn't working out more quickly, and then how to effectively execute that. I remember the first time I had to let someone go, and it's never fun, and it's a terrible experience, but I was told how I could do that more effectively. And that was a real leadership lesson, because it should be a shorter conversation than I was making it. So that was one. And then I would say a highlight, and this is something I carry with me, is I was at Career Builder. I initially started leading the Dallas office. It was really not performing well at all. And it quickly turned into the top performing office in the country. And one day, the CEO, Bob Montgomery, showed up at the office unexpectedly and just wanted to know what we were doing and how it had transformed. And so he just came and sat down in my office and said, "Hey, Jamie, if I walk around today and ask each one of your team members here what the number one area that they need to develop is based on your feedback, would they know?" And I confidently could say yes, because I regularly had one-on-one meetings with them, and we would work on areas of strength and development. And they did always know what's the one area that I thought could help them raise the bar to the next level. And that's because as leaders, our job is not to motivate people. They need to come with that, but it's to help change the trajectory of their success. And if they could be here, so to speak, that we help them raise the bar and achieve even higher levels of success based on some level of feedback, support, leadership, and it's truly leading people and maximizing their performance. So I said yes. Bob literally walked around to everyone and asked, what is the number one thing Jamie thinks that you could do that would help you to grow? They could answer the question, and I got promoted to VP of Sales and VP of Training and Development from that meeting with him, and obviously the success we had had. But that was really meaningful to just understand the impact of that. And then I would say one final thing in terms of leadership and experience, and just a lesson I would say, is oftentimes as leaders, we talk so much about the goals of the company. And that's really important, especially in sales. We're talking about quota, right? That's the goal. That's the what that they need to hit for the company. But true leadership is understanding the bigger picture, which is the why. Why does that person care about our what? So the bigger the why, the bigger the try, and the better the how. And so it was just really impactful to learn that when we know our team members' goals, not just the what, because professionally the what may be the quota, but the why behind it, the conversation changes. And we're not just talking about our goals or their actual goal for the company, but the bigger picture of why it matters to them. And the impact is so much greater of those conversations in terms of leading to performance shifts.
Oh, I like that. Now, what do you think? I think this is so good, but what do you think the biggest, what separates great sales leaders from the average ones?
Well, I think a lot of sales leaders are sales managers, and that's what makes them average. They are managing things or numbers, but they're not really leading people. And I think what separates a true leader, and this is something I wrote, The Power of Two, Exponential Sales Leadership, and I talk about exponential sales leadership is really changing the trajectory of someone's success by influence and by getting in the trenches with them. And so it's not just, we oftentimes think really great salespeople make great leaders, and that can happen, but that's not a magic formula, and oftentimes it doesn't work. It's really people who want to pour into others to bring out the best in them. And great leaders are influencing people, leading people, impacting people. They understand their team members' bigger why. They're leading each person individually based on that understanding and understanding what motivates them. And they are truly shifting the trajectory of where someone could come in on their own. They're taking it to the next level because they're pouring into them personally and professionally in terms of development.
I like that. Now, a lot of sales leaders are unintentionally micromanaging. How can they shift from control to more empowerment without losing accountability?
Ooh, that's such a great question. That's such a great question. And yes, they are oftentimes unintentionally micromanaging, and that's more sales management than leadership, but we do need to have accountability. And that's what's hard. It's hard to find that happy medium. I would say here's the magic spot. Here's the magic bullet. There has to be accountability, but when we're just gathering data for accountability, the numbers, the appointments, the activity, without teaching them how to use that data to make decisions about their business and how to achieve their quota, that's what changes things for them. That's the difference between micromanaging and just collecting the data, and then teaching them how to use that data is leadership. And so, for example, in the beginning, when I've got a new salesperson at Proactivate, we're collecting data, and we're always collecting the data. But in the beginning, I'm saying, okay, we're going to collect more data because we want to help you figure out your formula for success. We know that if you do this many appointments a week with this level of decision makers, you'll hit this quota. And to get this many appointments, here's the activity that needs to happen, starting at, the lead gen to the blueprinting to the appointment dialing. Here are all the metrics. This is the for sure formula. You will not miss quota if you do this, but you may be able to do it more effectively. And you may be able to do it with less appointments, or with this same number of appointments, hit a higher quota. So let's gather this data over the first 90 to 120 days, depending on what the sales cycle is. And then let me help you diagnose this data to your formula based on your goals and what you're wanting to achieve. And then it's teaching them how we're looking at it. And for example, if we look at ratios and data, we can sometimes tell that someone needs help with closing. But at other times, we may look at it and see that they're not meeting with the right level of decision maker, or they're not doing the right activity. And all of those are different issues, different ways to lead. But a lot of sales managers just stop at how many appointments? Have you hit, just numbers, without teaching them how we're looking at them and helping them see how to look at the numbers and make shifts in their business. And for us, it should give us data on how to develop them. And for them, it should give them data on areas to focus on. But it's like if our child came to us and said, I have a headache, and we just said, here's some Advil. We don't know why they have a headache. They could have a headache because they could have not had enough water and been dehydrated. They might be super stressed. They might not be getting enough sleep. Someone might have drank too much. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but we're just assuming it's this and saying what to do without looking deeper. And there's so much data that we can get from collecting. There's so much information we can get from collecting that data. But managers are often stopping, and I call them managers for this reason, at the data without helping to really teach through that. That's the difference between leadership and management, and really not micromanaging, but helping to elevate.
That's really good. That's really good. And tell me this, where do you think leaders are often misunderstanding what salespeople really need to succeed?
I think a big misunderstanding, Jim, comes from just collectively leading, right? So if we try to assume that all salespeople need the same things to succeed, and our style is the same with all, that's probably not the most effective. I think too, oftentimes it's either too much or not enough, and we're not finding the happy medium. It's either, like you said, micromanaging, but not developing. And then I think there's also a big misunderstanding. Most sales organizations, if they are developing their people, which sometimes they're just saying, here you go. They have no formula for success. They have no, boundaries, so to speak, of here's what it takes to be successful. And so we've got to have that formula that we give them until they figure out their own. We've got to have a really successful sales methodology, a sales process that we give them, and they can make it their own with their own style. But those things have to be there, and sometimes they're just not, and that's a misunderstanding. Also, I think collectively as sales organizations, we spend time developing the skill sets of our people. And the biggest misunderstanding is that that's great. They have to have the skill set, but only 20% of their success is based on skill set. And yet that's where we're spending the time developing them. And 80% of their success is based on mindset. It's learning to transform the way people think, because oftentimes it's them getting in their own way of success, and it's based on how they think. And if we could learn to develop them in this area, this is an area, as you know, I'm very passionate about, because it unlocks our performance and transforms really how we perform based on shifting how we think.
Oh, I think that is so, so important. When I recruited and hired and trained a lot of insurance agents. This was their first job.
Right.
And I would recruit and train and hire them. And I found a disconnect, and it took me a long time to figure out that I was at war with their mom in their head. And here's what I mean by that. So what happened was they were getting all tongue-tied and locked up as I watched them go through to ask questions on an insurance application. See, Mom told them, you never ask a woman how old she is. You never ask a woman how much she weighs. You never ask anybody how much money they make. And here's this insurance application, and they're asking those pertinent questions. And it was a psyche that their neural pathway said, no, we don't go down that path. We don't go down that path. And it was totally a mind shift. So that is such a great point. That's a great point.
So funny and so true. And so many of us have self-limiting beliefs that came from somewhere in our childhood, our parents, our mom, whatever, and that we're not even aware of. And just coming into awareness of those things, like the things you just pointed out, realizing that they're in our head and they are holding us back is really, really important.
Yeah, that's really, really good. So how do you, let me ask you this. I want to ask you why most companies fail, or what do they get wrong when they're hiring salespeople?
Oh my goodness. Okay, there are really a lot. I would say it starts with knowing what you're looking for, like most things in life, right? How do you know that you got there if you don't know where you're going? So creating an ideal candidate profile is critical. And I think most times companies are creating a job description, but this is not a job description. This is like an ideal candidate profile. It takes it's way beyond a job description. And it's understanding, first of all, what you're looking for and then how you're finding them. So when you identify the culture of what you're looking for, like what type of person and what formula for success, what type of activity have they done, what background. A lot of times companies just think they want someone from their industry. That sometimes can be important, but not necessarily. And what skill sets, yes, but they're not qualifying based on mindset, which is really important to us at Proactivate because we know it's 80% of success. And then they're looking, and this is a huge mistake. So understanding what they're looking for, the ideal candidate profile, number one. They don't do that. I've made that mistake in the past where I've thought, if I like them, I enjoy lunch with them, I'll hire them. But that's not really a very thorough process. So number one, that. Number two, they're looking in the wrong pond. They are trying to find the best of the worst, Jim, because they're looking on, online, where typically that's where unemployed salespeople are. And not to say there's not a wonderful needle in the haystack that or a diamond in the rough, so to speak. But a lot of times those are the people who got fired for not hitting quota. Not always. There are anomalies. But if they're looking online or at career fairs or places where unemployed salespeople are, they're limiting themselves to around 4% of the market. So it's finding working and winning salespeople and going out in the market to attract them to you, which takes a lot more work, but that's where you find the superstars. Then the next problem is the qualification process, because we have to remember, I think of sales like recruiting, like dating. People are on their best behavior on the first couple of dates. So how do you dig under the surface to really get to the real stuff? Like you say in dating, I don't want to date your sales department, I want to date operations. So in interviewing, it's the same thing. How do we dig under the surface? So you need a really in-depth, customized qualification process based on that ideal candidate profile. And it needs to include, at Proactivate, we spend about an hour and a half going through a really in-depth qualification, but it's not just skill set, Jim. There's a skill set component, there's a whole mindset component, and then there are simulation evaluations where we are seeing them in action in key components of the sales process. So it really needs to include all of those components, and it needs to be much, much broader than what most companies do to invest in that qualification process. And then, it really is important to make offers that will be accepted, that people are excited about, not overpaying, but not trying to, the offer, and when you make that offer, it says a lot. And then really thoughtfully getting them on board well with training and development.
Yeah, that's very good. And, you teach a lot about the high performance mindset, your system there. Can you talk to me about some of those key pillars of that model?
Sure, yes. I think, first and foremost, I think a lot of us are just not aware of how our mindset naturally operates. So I talk about high performance mindset a lot because, and especially within sales organizations, but leadership or any area of a company, it really helps solve the problem of underperformance by transforming the way people think. So just naturally, we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them flip to the negative without us being aware of that. So the first thing I try to teach is just awareness of that. And I'll tell you, just one funny kind of way of applying this, but a lot of times when I'm doing a keynote or a workshop, I'll ask for a volunteer. And Jim, I could be in a room with 3,000 people that are in leadership, 500 VPs of sales, 50 salespeople. It doesn't matter. 0 or 1 person will finally step forward, but it is like at first you look around and 0 people are moving and they're all looking scared, like, what is she going to ask me? And I do it in the beginning because I think it helps create this awareness for the issue that we're up against. And that's the first thing we need to understand before we can start solving it. And what happens is this one person comes forward, ask their name. That's all I ask. That's all I need. I give them $100 and thank them, $100 bill. And they're like, that's it? That's all you wanted? And I then ask everyone else in the audience, being as honest as possible in that moment, what thoughts went through your head when I asked you for when I asked for a volunteer? What were you telling yourself? And that is an example of those 60,000 thoughts we have every day, where 80% are negative, we know they were thinking things like, I don't want to look stupid. I don't know what she's going to ask. I'm unsure of myself. I might not be enough. My answer might not be enough, but it's being something not enough, usually. Fear of failure. And that's what usually comes out. And always comes out, really. There's always one person who says, well, I just wanted to let someone else volunteer this time. But
I think that I
yeah,
think that's funny. So when next time I see you speak, I know that I'll get $100 out of it if
you're
you
going to
ask
be
that
like, it's
question.
me, I'm volunteering. You're going to run right up. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't tell this story. But so we start, we understand what we're up against and why
Hmm.
mindset is so important. And then
Hmm.
one of the pillars is just understanding the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and how that impacts our success. That when we learn to flip the script, that
Yeah.
we sell 38% more, that we're 23% more energetic, 300% more creative, like that impactful shift is incredible in terms of our performance. So then how do we do that? I liken the growth mindset to living in the solutions room, and the
Yeah.
fixed mindset to living in the situation room. So we'll look at
Mm.
what are the number one challenges we're facing that could change the trajectory of our success if solved.
Yeah.
And are you living in the solutions room or the situation room? And then we talk about the pillars for growing your mindset, because we know the issue. So then how do we shift it? So
Yeah.
self-talk management,
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
self-regulation,
Hmm.
self-activation. And then we talk a lot about breaking through self-limiting beliefs and
Yeah.
the impact of that. And so all of those things help to grow our mindset and help us think at a higher level, which in turn helps us perform at a higher level. What I love about it is companies then are not just developing skill sets, but also the mindset of their people, and people feel like they were poured into, not just professionally, also personally within those sessions, because it impacts every area of their lives.
Yeah. That's so good. One of the things I was reading, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Daniel Amen.
Yes.
He wrote a book called You Happier. He's written several books, but he's the brain scan doctor.
Yes.
And he has a terminology where he calls ants. He says you have ants. And ants is an automatic negative thought. It's a neural pathway that just fires all the time, and it's just a really bad habit of thinking. And so I love what you said about self-talk. Talk to me about what you say when you talk to yourself.
So I learned this. I'm going to give credit here. Gerhard Schwartner, who is the
Hmm.
CEO and founder of Selling Power Magazine, I got certified through him about 10 years ago in this high performance mindset system. And this all stemmed from a conversation with him where he was so excited about the neuroscience behind it, really what you're talking about, how we can rewire those neural pathways to shift the way we're thinking and how that impacts performance. And we were talking personally about it one day. He was a mentor of mine, and I said something to him, like, he said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm doing well. I just am trying to balance being a single mom and running a business, and I feel like I don't do it all well all the time. And it's hard to balance it. I want to do more in both areas." And he stopped me and said, "Jamie, you are an incredible mother, and you're an incredible businesswoman. And if you were talking to your own best friend about you, and you weren't you, would you be saying that? Would you really say, I don't think I do all of it well or balance it all well? What would you be saying to your own best friend right now about your performance if you weren't you, basically?" And he taught me, really, and this is something, just really how we should be talking to ourselves like we would our own best friend. And often with our self-talk, we take an event that happened. We decide that didn't go how we wanted it to go, but then we give ourselves a new title. I am a failure. I am not good at this. I am not enough. Versus saying, that didn't go well. What did I learn? And so it's not being honest with ourselves, because we do need to obviously do that and be able to say when we can learn and grow from something. But that judgment we put on ourselves and how we talk to ourselves is not how we would talk to someone else. And, there are some sports psychologists, Weinberg and Gold, who wrote a book, but they found that 40 to 90% of athletes' success comes from their mental preparation, their self-talk management, things like that. And this all falls in that category. So I teach people some tricks on how to shift that self-talk. And I think it's really important. And it does, we have to rewire those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's really very, very important. And I think, the self-talk, when I study personalities, there's a sector, a group in the personalities, in the 5 voices, nurturers. And one of the things that they're notorious for is they are guilty of imposter syndrome. And everyone around them looks at them and says, wow, I wish I could be like them. And they have this tendency, and I think it's just kind of how their brain is wired. But being a sales leader or sales manager, you've got to work with them to really shift that and help them see that. Now, where I started learning about the self-talk was with Shad Helmstedt. Are you familiar with that name?
Tell me more.
He was a motivational psychiatrist. And one of the things that he was so in belief of, that self-talk would change his behavior. You've got to hear it first. So where the aha moment was for him is he started writing on his mirror in the morning about weight loss. And so he put up all these little Post-it notes and he would read them to himself. And what he found was he was starting to get late to work because he was trying to read all these things. Then what he did was he recorded himself saying these things so he could just push play and listen to it. And he would go through and says, I only eat this much. I eat fresh fruits and vegetables. I eat fresh fruits and vegetables. I like fresh fruits and vegetables. He would go through this whole process.
Like the affirmations, yeah.
Yeah, it was his wife. His wife thought he was absolutely crazy. And she didn't buy into any of this. She thought he was nuts. He said,
oh my gosh, I love it.
After 60 days, she didn't believe any of this stuff that he was doing. But she had lost 30 pounds.
No way.
Eavesdropping on his self-talk. And I just, that to me was kind of a game changer. I became friends with Shad. I don't know if he's still around, but he has written several books, but he was on Oprah and a couple other things. One was called The Self-Talk Solution, and the other was called What You Say When You Talk to Yourself. So it was really, really good. But I love that what you're talking about is self-talk and changing that mindset and everything else.
Yeah.
Today, leaders have a challenge. We're leading in a distracted world.
Yeah.
And a lot of teams are overloaded. They're distracted. And one of the things I just talked to I was consulting with a client, but he was giving me a lot of quotes from famous generals and championship coaches. And I was talking to him about how he talked to his team. And I said, don't say that. And he gave me a whole litany of all these leadership gurus are out there. And I said, all of those people are leading top performers. These are people who are at the peak of their life.
Right.
Your team is not there yet. Your team is still in development, and you've got to have that development mindset. And my favorite analogy is George Martin, who is known as the fifth Beatle.
Right.
And the Beatles came in and they weren't that good. and they'd been turned down everywhere. And George was the one who worked with them and really brought out that potential. And now George always says, oh, they would have been fine without me. But I don't know. I don't know, because he really sewed into them. I mean, they weren't great musicians, and he really brought the musicianship up, encouraged them, got them to do something great. But it was a way of how he developed them.
Yes.
And so the leaders in this distracted world, what advice would you give them to restore this focus and resilience that we really need?
Gosh, I mean, I think it does come down to leading by example with that and teaching them in those moments, because I think for all of us, we're all distracted. We all have so many distractions, and it comes down to leading with what's most important and really focusing. That's why I love having this sounds so simple, but just the weekly one-on-ones with your team members, to where we're talking about what is the number one thing we need to focus on right now that would help to elevate performance or change the trajectory of success. But it's first things first, right? It's the one thing, that book, what are the most important things? And then really working on one thing at a time, because sometimes we just try to do so much, and then it makes all of the things less meaningful or less successful. And also just bringing the team member back to those few things or that one thing. And not when they are getting distracted, helping to really bring them back to what's most important that will impact their success. And the other thing I would say, Jim, is knowing their bigger why helps do that. Yeah. It helps bring back the focus to why we're even talking about all these things, what's really most important.
Yeah, that's good. Now, you've spoken a lot about limiting beliefs and, internal narratives that are happening. What are some of the most common ones you think that are holding leaders back?
I think holding anybody back, leaders, salespeople, it always comes down to something regarding not being something enough, usually good enough, smart enough, or a fear of failure. But it all comes down to just really belief about themselves, that they can't perform well enough, they're not going to be good enough, they are not good enough at that, whatever that is, whether it's in business or personally. But there's, I think, more interesting question is like, where did it come from? Because oftentimes, I mean, I talk about this in my TED Talk. It's good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, handsome enough, funny enough, talented enough, athletic enough, whatever the enough is, it's always something enough. But we can't really adjust that until we know the origin of that. And how was that thought created in our head? Because when we learn where that came from, we can then understand really the depth of that belief and how to dig that out of our mindset garden, so to speak, and shift that and choose to believe something else and shift those neural pathways.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. Now, you've written a lot of books, you've done the TED Talk, and you do a lot of speaking. Tell me, what are you most passionate about, sharing right now?
I am passionate about the area of performance mindset shift and breaking through self-limiting beliefs. And I'm passionate about it because I believe wholeheartedly that it helps people completely transform their performance, both personally and professionally. That they raise the bar on their lives, that they're living with more purpose and really as the best version of themselves, maximizing their success. And I'm also passionate about it because I feel like it's an area that people talk about and they're starting to understand it now, but they don't really know how to shift it, and they're not being developed in that area. And it's really, you could talk about someone not hitting quota, but when you get down to the what's holding them back, that is a breakthrough that transcends, just talking about the quota. And it impacts the performance significantly. And it changes the culture of the sales organization, the company, the team, whatever it is. People start talking about solutions to challenges instead of just talking about the problem and putting the monkey on someone else's back. They start looking at intentionally where they want to be and what they want to achieve instead of just going through motions. And they transform really their lives. How they, how you talk to others always starts with how you talk to yourself. How you perform starts with what you believe about yourself. And so I feel like there are so many impacts of this that are being unlocked. And I feel really, really strongly about that.
I like it. If you could go back and mentor yourself, your younger self, what leadership advice would you give?
My younger self, like a kid or a young leader?
You pick.
Wow. If I could go back, look, as a kid, I thought I wasn't important enough for part of my childhood based on self-limiting beliefs coming from my, environment growing up before I at one point, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, but shifted my environment and moved in with my dad and stepmom, Barbara, who really was like a mom to me and in my life since 5 years old and was, I called her mom and I consider her to be the greatest influence and impact of my life. And she helped me transform that. But growing up, I think I felt not important enough. So I would go back and mentor that kid, right, to believe differently. And that's always a work in progress. We learn these things. It's not always linear, but we are able to come back to these new neural pathways and new beliefs that help shift us forward. So I would go back and say, not true. And if I believe that still today, I wouldn't be able to stand before, hundreds and thousands of people and help them shift that.
Yeah. I love that. Well, what's next for you? Any projects you got coming up or anything, ideas you're excited about?
Well, I'm super excited just to continue to share my TED Talk. And the thing I'm most excited about is being able to continue this message by doing keynotes for organizations, either, their kickoffs or their company meetings, leadership meetings, sales events, things like that, because the impact is great. So I'm very excited about that. Considering a book on breaking through limiting beliefs. So we'll see about that for a future project, and just continuing to build and grow Proactivate to make an impact globally.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So where can people go to learn more about you, your books, your programs, all about Jamie?
So for me personally, jamiecrosbie.com, and it's Crosbie. And they're about my consulting and my speaking and things like that. And then Proactivate for talent solutions in sales, marketing, sales ops, and leadership. It's proactivate.net. And then, of course, LinkedIn. So we'd love to add value wherever we can.
Well, Jamie, it's been just a feast of knowledge that you've shared with me. I am so impressed with you, and I am so glad that we get to have this conversation, and so glad that we've become friends. And every time I get together with you and we have a conversation, I just am transformed in a new way, and it's a positive one, and I always feel good about being around you. So,
Jim, I feel the same way. And truly, it's such an honor to get to have the conversation with you. I have so much respect for you, and am so excited to hear your upcoming TED Talk and the impact that will make.
I'm so excited too, and I thank you for that recommendation and that wonderful referral.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Well, till next time, we'll talk soon.
We will talk soon. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks. All right.